Reviewing the drafts of the AFC West in 2023, how did the teams out west do for themselves in 2023 and beyond? Coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Checking in on the AFC West today, finishing up the AFC side of our post-draft deeper dive review here, looking at every division, every team's draft class, and some of our favorite picks and some of the angles, and figuring out how some of these teams are building their rosters going forward, learning a lot of clues about some of these front offices and some of these teams about how these teams are built. Today, checking in on the Broncos and the Chiefs and the Chargers and the Raiders of the AFC West. Let's start alphabetically here with the Denver Broncos, and they're still paying off some past debts, Matt. So not a big draft class in Denver, only 5 total selections, which started with Oklahoma wide receiver Marvin Mims. But before we get too deep in these draft classes, I know you have some salary cap information as well on the West.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple notes. First of all, we kind of teased that we might talk schedule release nonsense. And I'll be honest, the day after the schedule release is one of my least favorite podcasts ever because I know you looked into the Niners heavy. I did an hour show about the Steelers schedule as soon as it came out, which was a half hour too long, to be honest with you. And I'm sitting here looking at the schedule grid. I am not going to break down 32 teams like I did the Steelers. So over the weekend, maybe we'll find some nuggets that are noteworthy, or feel free to tweet us if your team has some weird things. We could talk about it, but I'm more into killing out the AFC this year right now for the draft stuff. And here's the go ahead. I was going
to say really the most important thing we already covered yesterday because we had a little information about that Week 1 49ers Steelers.
Yeah, exactly.
That's obviously the biggest key of the entire season right there, Week 1.
Yep, gonna have to put the voodoo hex on you guys when you come flying in. So, anyways, cap stuff in the West. Vegas, the Chargers, and Denver are all fine. They're all healthy. They have plenty. They have between 7.5 and 12 to spend, so they'll be okay. They don't have to make any big moves. Kansas City only has 1.8, to get there, so they might need to restructure somebody or make a cut or something along those lines just to get their rookies in and have some spending money for the year. But more noteworthy to me is what this division looks like next year, because Denver's one of the few teams in the negative. They're not super bad, but they're minus 6.4. The Chargers are dead last, minus 59.3. So does that mean cutting Khalil Mack, cutting Keenan Allen? I mean, this might be the Chargers window because they haven't even signed Herbert yet. So that's really disturbing. Where on the other flip side, Kansas City and Vegas are two of the healthiest cap situations in the league next year, 59.6 and 67 for Vegas. So Kansas City's as much in the green as the Chargers are in the red. I think I said that right.
Yeah, and so basically the Chargers have to look at the Chiefs and say, okay, how is that transition into big contract quarterback gone? Yeah. And how did they navigate that? And it looks like the Chiefs have navigated that as well as anybody. And it's kind of wild, actually, how Patrick Mahomes, when that contract was announced, $500 million. It's like, oh, is that a steal of a contract now for Kansas City? Looking at some of these other quarterback contracts and how some of the quarterbacks are getting paid that aren't as good as Patrick Mahomes. But yeah, so the Chargers do have to sort of transition from expensive roster, some of the older pieces. Some of the guys will age out, and they're gonna have to be smarter with money as Herbert gets paid in the very near future. They still have a year or two to figure that out, though.
Yeah,
before those big numbers start hitting the cap.
But that window is going to slam shut. If they don't win it this year, they're probably not going to improve their roster. And certainly the days of going and signing J.C. Jackson and things like that are long gone.
You ready for the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, interesting one.
Yeah, so 5 total players for the Denver Broncos. They didn't pick until the 32nd selection of round 2. And all of their picks had come via trade. So I always love when a team does that. So every single pick that the Denver Broncos spent was acquired elsewhere. It wasn't one of their original selections. They're still paying off the Russell Wilson trade. Didn't have a first round pick. They came up in the last or the 32nd pick in round 2 with Marvin Mims, Oklahoma wide receiver, speed demon, downfield threat. Drew Sanders in the 3rd round, just a few picks later, linebacker from Arkansas. Then Riley Moss, cornerback from Iowa in the 3rd round again. Then didn't pick until the 6th round where they picked up J.L. Skinner, Boise State, oversized safety, which was a nice selection there. I thought he would go much earlier than the 6th round in this draft. And then Alex Forsyth, a center out of Oregon in round 7. And that's a small Denver Broncos draft class.
It is a small class. I like a lot of the players they got. I don't know a ton about Forsyth. I mean, he's the 7th rounder. Skinner only fell because of a pec injury. He wasn't able to work out, but he is a traitsy, huge, more in the box type, a little bit of a throwback. I mean, he's not Cam Chancellor, but more that than he is Earl Thomas. I love Riley Moss. I mean, I'll be honest. I think there's some prejudice against his skin color for why he falls to 83, which, hey, I get too. I mean, it's just, you don't see a lot of corners that look like me, so whatever, but he's a really good player. I
just want to talk about Riley Moss. I watched him a lot pre-draft because I thought he might be in play for the 49ers in that 3rd round area. He went just before the Niners picked their late 3rd round, those comp picks. And he's got top end speed. He's a former track athlete, 6'1", 193. He doesn't have the longest arms despite being a taller corner. And, everyone's going to want to force him to safety,
right. But he's a really good corner.
Reasons, right. But he's a corner to me all day long. And, maybe could play safety in the future because he seems to be good in zones and, is not afraid to tackle people. But I even like him maybe in the slot because of how quick he is and how good he is with his hips, and he can turn and run with guys. And so outside, inside, versatile corner, Riley Moss, he's going to be started in the NFL at corner.
I think he will too. And I thought Drew Sanders would go noticeably earlier than 67 overall. He's a bit of a work in progress, only a 1-year player as an off-the-ball linebacker, and we know that adjustment's difficult. But Marvin Mims just screamed Sean Payton is putting his stamp on this offense. He's going to go get McGlinchey and the lineman he likes. They're going to run the football. I don't care that we have a lot of receivers. I want a wide variety. And, hey, Jerry Jeudy and Sutton and Hamler, you might not be here long.
Drew Sanders is an interesting one. Is he versatile or is he a tweener to where he's?
I know, right?
And it's probably why he fall into the top of the 3rd round. Because there's a difference between being a versatile player where you can line up in a lot of spots, play off ball, play versus the run, play inside, maybe blitz or even rush off the edge as a stand-up rusher, or are you a tweener and teams can't figure out how to use you? So you got to have a plan when you draft a player like that. And very interested to see because he's a very nice prospect and super athletic and has all the size you're looking for in a linebacker. Drew Sanders out of Arkansas. Interesting pick there. Will probably make or break the class potentially. I don't know about Marvin Mims at the 2nd round either. Like I like this. Yeah. I like him as a player, but he doesn't wow me. He's probably, especially with this roster, currently a number 3 or 4 wide receiver. And I don't know if he'll ever be more than a number 3 receiver.
Now, I wonder if Sutton or Jeudy will get traded. I know they picked up Judy's option. Is Hamler not long for the team? I don't know. It's kind of just the writing on the wall implies that that's the case.
Overall, though, it's a good class for only having 5.
Not bad.
I think they got useful players, and I think all of their players have an opportunity to stick and play a role for the Denver Broncos. Getting Skinner in the 6th round, they might have a starting strong safety there.
Yeah. No, I like what they did.
All right, next we've got the Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Las Vegas Raiders in the AFC West next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. What makes Built Bars so good, you ask? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real dark chocolate. That's right. Real chocolate really sets these bars off. You feel like you're getting a treat because you are getting a treat. And you're getting all the macros that come along with the best tasting protein bar in the world ever. I'm talking Built Bars, macros like only 130 calories in most Built Bars, only 4 grams of sugar in most Built Bars, but a whopping 17 grams of protein. If you talk to a nutritionist, they're going to tell you need to get a ton of protein in your diet. You're probably not getting enough and you need to avoid the sugar, and you're probably trying to keep your calories low if you're like me and trying to lose a few lbs. Well, Built Bar hits all of those and it tastes amazing, and you'll want to go back and reach for another Built Bar with flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream, peanut butter puff, the newest flavor at Built. There is the cookie dough chunk puff at Built. Do not ask me how they make it. They make the flavors and keep the calories low and the sugar low. And I don't know how they do it, and I don't care how they do it. You got to try the best tasting protein bar ever Built. You can find them at built.com. Find them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club as well. Find all the latest flavors and varieties and seasonal flavors. New ones coming all the time at built.com. Here we go. Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs, I think
this is an odd one.
Yeah, the way they ended the first round too. Felix and Duke Uzoma, nice player, and I think we've talked about this multiple times recently during the since and during the draft, Matt, with those late first round edges where they haven't had the greatest hit rate recently, and this could be another one of those out of Kansas State. He's a really good player. Some people had him as a first-round guy. Some people had him as a third-round guy, 6'3", 255. And it was a deep class of edge. So I don't know if the value was great for the Chiefs at the end of round one. Obviously, if they get a nice speed rusher there off the edge, you love that all day long for the Kansas City Chiefs. And then continuing on with the Chiefs draft here, round 2, Rashee Rice, SMU wide receiver, Wanye Morris. Round 3, Oklahoma offensive tackle, Shamari Connor, safety out of Virginia Tech in round 4, BJ Thompson, another edge outside linebacker type out of Stephen F. Austin in round 5, Keandre Coburn, Texas defensive tackle in round 6, and then Nick Jones, Ball State corner in round 7. It's not that it's a bad class, but I'm kind of squinting looking at this class thinking, yeah, where's the big impact here? And it's got to come from their late first round edge rusher.
Yeah, I think that's a very C+ type of pick. I mean, he's fine. I mean, I don't see a lot of Pro Bowls in his future. They drafted Karlaftis last year, who I also think's a C+ pick there. But
yeah, very different. So I guess stylistically, you can see how those guys fit together.
Yep. And pass rush is more important. Well, that's important to everybody, but they play with leads. These guys get a lot of opportunity to rush the passer. It's kind of like the Peyton Manning, Freeney, Mathis. They're always going to invest in defensive ends, as they should. I don't love the player. I'm not sure he's the 31st best player on the board, but he's not far off, so fine. I thought Rashee Rice was vastly overdrafted, to be honest with you. I'm not super impressed with him at all. I don't think he's a particularly good separator. There's a lot of – Wanya Morris has traits, but there's a lot of inconsistency to his game. And this is my fault. I'll be very honest. But their 4 day 3 picks, I know like nothing about any of them.
That doesn't mean they're not good.
That doesn't mean they're not good, but I did a lot of draft prep, and I don't know much about these guys at all.
I did watch some BJ Thompson, and athletic, sort of undersized edge rusher. It's clearly something that they were trying to address in this draft, and we've seen that with a lot of teams. And it's kind of like the in vogue thing to do nowadays, Matt, in the NFL draft. Is a team has a need, instead of just drafting one guy, you draft multiple guys. And so they got one in the first round, and they got another, took another swing on day 3 with 5th rounder BJ Thompson out of Stephen F. Austin, small school guy. See if you can, get some speed off the edge, which is clearly what the Chiefs were trying to accomplish in this draft. The day 2 is pretty important for this team because I'm with you with Wanye Morris. I watched a lot of his tape, and the traits are there, and you like the length, but I just didn't like the tape. I watched him, I was like, he's right. A player, and he should be better, and that always kind of worries me. But at the same time, you're talking late 3rd round. It's hard to find starting offensive tackle traits, and that's what they're betting on. And hopefully they can coach him up, and he makes good as at least a swing tackle, maybe even a starting right tackle in the NFL out of Oklahoma. Rashee Rice is an interesting one because a lot better in 2021 than 2022. And you see, you see that happen a lot. And, maybe he's a guy that should have come out early last year. But anytime, and this sort of happened last year with Sky Moore, when the Chiefs draft a wide receiver, you look at it and you start to talk yourself into maybe this is the fantasy sleeper this year, Rashee Rice. So I don't know what to think about this pick. They liked him enough to draft him in round 2. And if he hits, I mean, that could be huge for your fantasy teams. It did seem a little high for Rashee Rice, though, based on what I saw from him in 2022.
Well, I got some feedback on my Turks and Caicos driving on the wrong side of the road conversation the other day because I lumped Sky Moore in with Treylon Burks. And the reason for Kansas City is that's like the most complex offense going. So Western Michigan to the Andy Reid offense was a massive jump. It was driving on the wrong side of the road. I'm not sure it's going to be any better for Rashee Rice. And I think Sky Moore's a better prospect than he is.
Oh yeah, me too. So
yeah.
I'll let everyone chase the rookie and Rashee Rice, and I'll go to the year 2 guy after he's had a year in the system with a breakout for Sky Moore. I think.
Yep, I've kind of learned how to drive on the side of the road without killing the family.
Right, yeah, exactly. Exactly right. I love that. It's a great visual too.
It was bad, by the way. I'm not making that up at all.
I like picturing you sweating and driving on the wrong side of the road. Like,
we just got this beautiful island, and I'm screaming F-bombs left and right. Oh crap! I'm like just driving directly into traffic. It was not pretty.
Did you bring the hot dog roller to Turks and Caicos?
Didn't fit it on the plane.
Dang. Okay. All right.
I don't love this draft.
Yeah,
they'll be fine. I'm not worried about the Chiefs, but I don't love this draft.
Did you have a favorite pick or one standout least favorite pick? Any superlatives from this Kansas City draft? Because I kind of look at it and I'm like, yeah, I can see it, but don't love it. With it, like that's the way I felt about every pick. I guess BJ Thompson would be my favorite pick. Traitsy small school guy that if he was at a bigger school, maybe he's going 3 rounds earlier.
He needs to get stronger and tougher, but he could be a splash player on 3rd and 8, in a super loud stadium when you're winning by 15, as the Chiefs often are.
How about this for a sleeper pick is Keandre Coburn? We haven't even mentioned him really. Nose tackle out of Texas. If you get if you just get a guy who can play on first downs but can take up multiple blocks for the rest of your defense there in round 6, I like that pick.
Yeah, they lost Sanders, who kind of had that role for them. Went to the Saints. I thought Wanya Morris was just a little forced. Like if his buddy from Oklahoma would have fallen to 31, I think they'd have taken a tackle. I think they almost said, we have to take a tackle on the first 2 days. So Wanya Morris is the last one left. Let's grab him, So they're having 2 new tackles this year.
Yeah, they basically were like, well, the next time we come up, there's not going to be someone with offensive tackle traits.
This is the end of the road,
Yep. Wow. Did you just say this is the end of the road? Because Wanya Morris, he was named after the lead singer from the R&B group out of the 90s, Boyz II Men.
Really?
Yeah, and that was accidental by you, but that was pretty amazing, Matt. Well done.
What's even crazier is, does Boyz II Men sing a song called The End of the Road? I don't even know if that's true. You don't know. That's how much I live under a rock. So if you told me to name 5 Boyz II Men songs, I don't think I'd come up with any, let alone something about the end of the road. So,
that's fantastic.
So definitely an accident.
I love it. All right. So at Williamson NFL, your Boyz II Men tweets. That's where they belong.
There you go.
Oh, that is great. Let's go to the
more of a Guns N' Roses Zeppelin kind of guy.
Okay. Yeah. There were no Axl Roses in this draft that I know of.
No.
All right. Los Angeles Chargers draft 2023, Quentin Johnson at pick. So here we go. The Denver Broncos, every pick they used was not their original pick. Los Angeles Chargers, every pick they used was their original pick.
That rubs me wrong. Like I said that about the Bengals too. Like, make a move. Come on.
And not only that, no previous moves to get rid of a pick, just rounds 1 through 7, no comp picks, no extra picks, no trades.
Make a move. Do something. Trade a 5th round pick for somebody.
This is a D- draft just for that, man.
Just for that. Come on.
Although I really like a lot of the players they drafted. It's going to get higher. It's going to get the highest grade probably yet. Because of what it could potentially be. I thought they got multiple starters, and I think they got some players that could be, role players as well in this class. Let's start with Quentin Johnson, the 3rd wide receiver selected.
Yeah.
Who was 21 in between? Smith and Jigba was 20, and the Chargers drafted Quentin Johnson from TCU at 22. That means...
No, you're right. Smith and Jigba was 20. Johnson was 21, Zay was 22, Addison was 23. So he was 2nd receiver off the board. I just pulled it up.
Okay, so it was pick 21, not 22. So what I'm looking at is wrong here. Okay, so I thought he was the 2nd wide receiver off the board. Quentin Johnson, TCU wide receiver to the Los Angeles Chargers. They needed to get younger with their wide receiver group and, find that future starter. And so some people had Quentin Johnson going top 15, top 10. Didn't like that. We just made fun of him for not trading, but standing pat at 22, getting Quentin Johnson, I don't think is a bad pick at all for where this team is and the direction they're going and what they needed. So Quentin Johnson, TCU wide receiver to the Los Angeles Chargers. I like that one. Tuli, Tui Pelotu.
Nicely done. I'm going to
edge rusher out of USC, sort of a bigger body guy that slimmed down before the draft. I want to pause on this one. This is an interesting pick because when I saw Tuli's combine, it was like, 6'3", 266 pounds. And I was like, okay, so, edge rusher, maybe outside linebacker, and, saw how he plays at USC where they kind of use some stand-up rushers. And then I put on the tape and watched him. Dude looked like dude was 290 pounds. And so I was like, okay, what's going on here? And so I guess he did drop a lot of weight to try to get ready for the combine and run faster and do all of those things. So to be honest with you, I liked him better, bigger, just be big and strong, but be a bigger edge. So I'd rather see him at 280 pounds than the 266 that he got down to, because I don't think it really helps him that much for what he's going to be. And I don't really like the way they used him that much at USC anyway. So maybe a better pro than a college player, and he is active and can move around, maybe play some inside rushing as well, so sort of an outside end, bigger end that can play inside. So interesting pick there, and we'll see what direction.
Let's stop there real quick, because I have a problem with I look at him not the opposite of you did, but almost exactly the same. But I think he's back to that conversation of, we talked about with Drew Sanders. Is he versatile, or is he a tweener? Or is he neither? I think he's neither. I think he's Solomon Thomas. I think he's going to get washed out on the inside and isn't twitchy enough for the outside. I really worry about him, to be honest with you. And he did stand out.
I have a feeling that that's what his draft grades were telling him, and that's why he tried to slim down.
Right. I thought so too.
Like,
and
I need to be a pure edge and not this tweener inside guy.
And I don't think he's not built that way either.
No, he's thick. He's a thick guy.
Yeah.
So, and I get what you mean. So round 2, so that type of player, you're like, let's draft him round 3 or 4, see what we get in a mid-round guy, not in round 2.
Yeah, I was never a fan. I said the exact same pre-draft. So I do like some of their picks, but that's not one of them.
Well, Matt, maybe my favorite pick for the Los Angeles Chargers is next in round 3. We'll talk about a very different type of linebacker that the Chargers drafted in round 3. We'll talk about the second half of the Chargers draft, our favorite picks from that class, and then finish up with the Las Vegas Raiders next. And I do want to thank everybody once again for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to the everydayers. And of course, next week, we're going to come back and we'll have Matt Williamson's rookie dynasty rankings. We're going to talk NFC. We haven't even gotten to the NFC side of things, division by division, team by team, draft reviews, all that and more as we get prepared for 2023 training camp right here on Peacock and Williamson every day. All right. So round 3 for the Chargers after drafting Quentin Johnston and Tui Pelotu in round 2, Dion Henley, a really athletic off-ball linebacker out of Washington State late in round 3. And this is definitely my favorite pick of their draft because I think he's going to be a starting, will linebacker, can run and hit, super athletic. 6'1", 225. Is that even undersized anymore? I don't think it is for how you have to match up with teams in the NFL. And so especially with looking at some of these teams in the division, right? So Dion Henley, I like this pick a lot. I think they got a starting linebacker, super active, super athletic in round 3, late in round 3.
Yeah, I kind of brushed over Quentin Johnston. I want to talk about him super quick. And first of all, the Eagles and Chargers were the only 2 teams that drafted 3 guys from the same school, 3 TCU dudes. Fine, whatever. But back to the salary cap conversation, they're so far in the hole. And if you remember, there was talk that they might get away from Keenan Allen, but instead they pushed it down the road. I don't know that they'll be able to bring back Williams and Allen next half situation. And I do like the spacing in age from Allen to Williams to Johnston. And they were like the least explosive offense in the entire league last year. Some of it was scheme, but a big play guy like him that can get downfield adds up. Go ahead.
Just with the Allen stuff, because I think Allen's very close to retirement, and who knows, maybe this will even be his last year in the NFL. I'm sorry, Keenan, I'm not trying to push you out the door or anything.
Sure.
Age and injuries and, seeing what style of player he is, I thought maybe they could have added somebody to be that sort of slot player to replace Allen eventually. They went with the outside wide receiver in Quentin Johnston, who still fits in with them, now and in the future. But, maybe Darius Davis, the 4th rounder out of TCU, Johnston's teammate, much different wide receiver, super fast, but small, 5'8", 165, sort of return man slot receiver. Maybe that was the pick for backing up Keenan Allen now. And maybe they get a player who can be that dynamic slot receiver in returner in round 4. That it still felt a little early for Darius Davis, as athletic as he is, just because of his size, and harder to project him to be a wide receiver 3 even in the NFL, just because of his size.
But speed was needed. I mentioned the lack of explosive plays, so I kind of get it, but I thought that was early. Real quick on Henley as well. I like the player. They need him. They just haven't had a lot of success with those guys, the Kenneth Murrays, so that doesn't mean he shouldn't go back to the well. I'm not condemning the pick at all. And I thought he'd go earlier in 85. So I'm fine with that. That is my favorite pick of the draft as well. I have one other late one I like too.
Speaking of those late ones, so mentioned day 3 there started with Darius Davis in round 4, wide receiver, return man out of TCU, Jordan McFadden, Clemson guard in round 5, Scott Matlock, Boise State D tackle in round 6, and then the third TCU prospect finishing up the draft just as they started out of TCU, quarterback Max Duggan in round 7. So there you go. You get a cheap
quarterback and both his receivers from TCU.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You must love that TCU passing game.
Right. I don't know. I look at Duggan and think he might be Sean Hill or what's his face? Taysom Hill. I'm sorry.
Taysom Hill. Right.
Yeah. He might be that guy. Whatever.
I don't know if he's quarterbacky enough for me. And if you have to turn to him, but we'll see.
Matlock's a pick I like though. I mean, he's really? Dirty work, interior, tough guy that isn't the best athlete. He's like that guard you draft in the 4th round that you just can't get out of the starting lineup, or Greg Gaines next to Aaron Donald, somebody like that just gets beat up and does all the dirty work, and they stick in the league.
Yeah. And before you know it, you're like, oh man, this guy's been here for 8 years.
Right. Yeah. Right. Played a lot of snaps.
So bringing it full circle from the top where you talked about Khalil Mack and the cap situation for the Chargers, maybe that's why they felt the need to force that edge player in round 2, looking ahead to next year's roster more so than this year's roster, and using this year with him as a backup, Tui Pelotu, to try to figure out what he is for them in the future, if he is that edge guy.
Probably right. Bosa's a foundational player. Mack is probably someone they can't afford, so go get a successor or at least try it. I just don't think that's who he is. I don't think he doesn't remind me of Khalil Mack at all.
Quentin Johnston's going to be the big key to this draft, though. How does he develop in the NFL? There's clear strengths, but some things about his game where, you see a 6'3", 208 receiver and you think, okay, he's that, vertical stretching is going to win the ball down the field and make plays on the ball, and Moss guys. And he makes some nice plays, but he's not really that.
No, ball skills and hands are questionable.
And he's pretty good after the catch for a tall receiver, but the way he runs after the catch isn't really how guys are good at running after the catch in the NFL. So I wonder if that'll even translate. So this is it's a sort of a boomer bust sort of a pick there at wide receiver in Quentin Johnston, which is why, I didn't buy the hype on him being, an earlier 1st round pick. I like him late in round 1, but I still have some reservations about how he develops in the NFL. It'll be interesting to see him on an NFL field.
I agree. And I hope he doesn't. If the things don't go well for him, I could see him having a Chase Claypool career, and that would be disappointing,
Yeah, bigger receiver that doesn't play the bigger receiver game as much as you expect him to.
Right. Good tester, but doesn't always translate to the field, and
How about those okay draft? What's that?
It's an okay draft.
Yeah. They did all right for themselves. They need it's I could see there's big bust potential in that Chargers draft. I could see where we look back on this and be like, oh yeah, well, they got a return man and some backups, or they're like, okay, well, we got a number 2 wide receiver at the very least. We got a starting capable edge. We got a super athletic modern day linebacker who's a starter, and and some dirty work guys and some really key rotational players as well. So that Chargers draft could go in a lot of directions.
It could, but you're right. I mean, as is the case with most, if Johnston's a real asset, then you're in pretty good shape. But I don't love how the Chargers are sitting right now. A lot of that just goes back to their cap situation for next year, and they haven't even signed Herbert.
Las Vegas Raiders started the draft off at pick 7 with Tyree Wilson, Texas Tech defensive end. Then they came back and moved up a few spots for Michael Mayer, the tight end out of Notre Dame in round 2. I want to start there because those are two potentially cornerstone players for the Raiders. You come out of the first 2 rounds with potentially a stud edge rusher and a do-it-all tight end. I think you got to be excited about that if you're a Raiders fan.
Yeah, frankly, I thought Wilson was a little overhyped, but that's when people were talking about him number 2 to the Texans or number 3. It's 7, opposite Max Crosby. Okay. That you don't even need him to be a great technician now. He can learn. He's still going to impact the game. Immense upside. Michael Mayer screams Patriot tight end, which I think is what they're after. There's obviously a hole there. Quality player. So yeah, I think that first 2 picks were well done.
Absolutely. They came back with Alabama defensive tackle Byron Young, who's a player I like that I thought was underrated through the process, and because I thought he was going to end up going on day 3, he ended up going in round 3. Right. Okay, so he ended up going where he should have gone in round 3. So good on the Raiders there.
Maybe even a little early.
Oh yeah, actually, slightly early.
Right.
Well inside the top 100 picks, and so a couple of young defensive linemen for the Raiders early. Then they came back in the later 3rd round with Trey Tucker at pick number 100. Actually. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Trey Tucker, Cincinnati wide receiver. Jacorian Bennett, super speedy Maryland cornerback, a lot of speed out there at corner for that Maryland defense. That was early round 4. Late round 4, Aiden O'Connell, Purdue quarterback. Christopher Smith, Georgia safety in round 5. Amari Burney, Florida outside linebacker in round 6. And then round 7, Nesta Jade Silvera, a defensive tackle out of Arizona State. And I cannot tell you a lot about Nesta, Matt, the 7th round selection, except for he's 6'2", 304.
So to summarize, this might be the worst division draft that we'll do of the 8, to be honest with you. None of them have me doing cartwheels, but I do like the first 2 picks for the Raiders. Again, Byron Young in the 5th round. Wow, nice pick. 70th overall. Yeah. Trey Tucker, I thought, went a round or 3 too early. I do think Bennett and Smith, the 2 defensive backs in a bad secondary, will play a lot. Christopher Smith's probably my favorite pick. I know he's undersized, but a lot of quality snaps for Georgia. Important player. They were part of that quarterback run in the 4th round that I think a lot of those quarterbacks are 6th round type guys, but they went in the 4th this year. Maybe O'Connell gets a chance. I didn't feel like the Raiders had the roster to do that, to take a developmental mid-round quarterback. Why not just take a guard there or something? But I got no problems with O'Connell, and he might get a shot. Who knows?
I didn't dislike the defensive backs they drafted, Matt.
Right. They were my favorite
Christopher Smith. But at the same time, if you look at this draft and you say, okay, well, hold your water on Byron Young, get one of the DBs there early in the 3rd round. Their secondary needed it. And then if you came back and Byron Young's still there for you late round 3, and then you push everybody down around, the draft starts to look a lot better.
Now I like it. Right.
And, there's no guarantee those guys would have all been there around later. But, we're kind of saying we'd be okay with that because they kind of went too high anyway. Let somebody else draft them too early, right? So there
definitely was a DB at 70 that would have been worth taking.
Yes, right, exactly. And, Bennett and Smith might end up being really good for the Raiders, but, it's hard to project them being difference-making players and jumping right in a secondary where maybe they could have found a guy in round 3 to do that. And we'll see what Byron Young ends up looking like. And, I did like him as a prospect, so I don't have a huge problem with it. But, seeing who else was there, Trey Tucker felt too early in round 3.
Riley Moss. So we talked about to start the show.
Right.
He was there. Take him there, and then everything looks a little better to me,
Mm-hmm. Right. So I don't know exactly what they saw in Trey Tucker. There's so many of these small, undersized receivers in this class, and I really thought they were going to fall, and teams were willing to draft these guys much earlier than I expected. So we'll see how many of them make it in the NFL, and we'll see if the NFL just starts to just, I don't know, we just start seeing Smurf wide receivers spread around the league now. Maybe that's the new NFL. Who knows? But yeah, it's all about those first 2 picks, Tyree Wilson and Michael Mayer, and I think they're going to get impact there, which makes this probably still the best draft in this division.
I suppose they also had the best cards in their hand. I mean, they had the earliest picks. Denver didn't have much. Yeah, I mean, so and I don't know that it took a super genius. I'm not giving them a hard time, but I don't know that you had to be a draft expert to pull the trigger on Wilson at 7 or Mayer at 35. When it starts to get difficult is when I was less impressed with this draft, but it's still probably the best draft of the division.
Mayer, from a fantasy perspective, Jimmy G loves to target himself a tight end.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen how tight ends operate in that offense with Josh McDaniels from his time with the Patriots. I got to believe in dynasty leagues, Michael Mayer is going to be a pretty hot ticket, right?
He is. Going into the draft, he was my 5th tight end. I had to put him ahead of Musgrave because Musgrave ended up with Kraft, which I think hurts each other in Green Bay. So he's now 3rd for me behind Kincaid, who's an easy 1, and Laporta. I think Laporta's situation is better.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people have Mayer over Laporta. I think Laporta is the better receiver of the two, but I get it. Mayer's okay athleticism kind of worries me.
Yeah, more of a chain mover than a big play tight end for sure.
But I think he has very little bust potential. There'll be Mayer jerseys in the stands and, with Darth Vader helmets and whatnot. And he'll be a very likable quality player. I just don't think he'll ever be Kittle or Kelsey or those guys,
Right. And better as a pure 3-down football player than maybe fantasy player.
Yeah. And they're going to run the ball with Jacobs and he'll help. And, right.
Little teaser, by the way, from Matt Williamson's Dynasty rookie rankings that are coming up on future episodes of Peacock and Williamson. I do want to thank everybody once again for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Talk to you next time, Peacock and Williamson.